Summary. Sometimes, life throws us unexpected moments that leave a lasting impact. I never thought a simple walk with my brother's young colleague would make me question everything I thought I knew about connection and self-discovery. But it did, and it's something I'll never forget. Before I begin, don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. Now, before I begin, tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know which cities and towns are joining me for this memory that stayed with me for years. It was a Thursday afternoon, the kind of day where the air feels like it's still holding on to the last remnants of summer, but hints at the fall to come. My brother had asked me to help out with a small favor, which honestly, I didn't expect would lead to anything significant. His colleague, Jack, was new in town and needed a bit of guidance on how to get around. "You know the area better than I do," he'd said, "and Jack's not the best with directions. Maybe you can take him for a walk around the park and show him the sights." I'd only met Jack a few times at family gatherings, and from what I could tell, he was a bit on the younger side, late 20s or so, and had that confident, driven energy that people half his age sometimes wear like armor. He had that type of youth that seemed to almost radiate, like he knew where he was going, while I didn't exactly feel like I did, but of course I said yes. Jack was already waiting in the parking lot when I arrived. He looked a bit awkward standing by his car, hands in his pockets, glancing around like he was trying to figure out how to fill the silence. He smiled when he saw me and waved a little too enthusiastically, which made me chuckle. I was a little more relaxed around him than I expected. Maybe it was the way he had that youthful energy, yet there was something about him that didn't quite match his age. Maybe it was his eyes, kind of old in a way, like he'd already seen a lot. We started walking down the sidewalk toward the park. The trees were just beginning to change, their leaves turning a soft gold and orange, and the sky was an unbroken blue that made everything feel open, full of possibilities. At first, the walk was the usual small talk. He asked about the local spots, where to get good coffee, and I filled in the gaps with suggestions. It was pleasant enough, but honestly, I wasn't sure how long this walk would last. Then, something shifted. We were standing by a bench when Jack asked, almost out of nowhere, "So, what's your story?" I froze for a second, surprised by the directness of it. My story? I laughed, unsure of how to respond. "Yeah," he said, a little sheepish now, like maybe he hadn't meant to be so blunt. "I don't know. You seem like you've lived a lot. You've been around." For some reason, his question stuck with me. I could tell it was one of those innocent, almost childlike questions, but it made me pause. What was my story? Had I really lived much of one? What was the big story of my life that I was carrying around? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I just sat on the bench, motioning for him to join me. "What about you?" I asked, curious to flip the conversation. "What's your story?" Jack sat down beside me, pulling his jacket tighter around his shoulders. "Well, I guess I'm still figuring it out. You know, with work and everything. I just moved here, trying to make some friends, get used to the pace of life." I nodded, understanding more than I cared to admit. I hadn't had much in the way of a solid foundation either, not for a long time. My life had been a series of small, fragmented moments stitched together, like a quilt that didn't quite fit. I'd been divorced for years now, my children grown and busy with their own lives, and here I was, caught between the past and the future, unsure where I stood in the middle of it all. For a while, we just sat there, watching people walk by, children running after stray balls, an elderly couple taking their slow stroll. It felt nice, though, this quiet space between us. No pressure to say anything profound, just the hum of life surrounding us. But then Jack said something that hit me, and I'm still not sure why it felt so significant at the time. "You know, sometimes I look at older people," he said slowly, "and I wonder what they think about life, about everything they've lived through. It must be different when you've seen so much of the world, You can't really go back to being naive after that, can you?" I blinked, caught off guard by the honesty in his voice. "What makes you think I've seen so much of the world?" His smile was gentle. "You just have that way about you. Like you've learned things. Hard things, you know." The words sat with me for a long time. It wasn't that I hadn't been through hardships, of course I had, but hearing someone say it out loud, so simply, made me realize how much I had been holding back. I hadn't just survived. I had learned, I had grown, and I hadn't really given myself credit for that in years. We stood up to continue our walk, and I found myself looking at Jack differently. He wasn't just some younger guy fumbling his way through life. He was someone who could see things, notice things about people. Maybe more than I had been willing to let myself see. We talked more as we walked, not about the small stuff anymore, but about life, real life. What it meant to move forward when the world felt like it was changing too fast, how to stay present when the future loomed large. And for the first time in a long time, I felt heard. Not just as a woman with history, but as a person still figuring out her own path. By the time we reached the end of the park, I realized that this walk wasn't just a favor anymore. It had turned into something more meaningful, something I hadn't expected. Jack, in his quiet, observant way, had helped me see something important about myself. And in return, I think I'd done the same for him. As we said our goodbyes, Jack's parting words stayed with me. "Thanks for sharing that with me." I smiled and nodded, realizing just how much that walk had given me. It was strange how an unexpected encounter could make you reflect so deeply. Life really does have a way of surprising you when you least expect it. It was a few days later when I received a message from Jack. It wasn't unusual for him to reach out. He'd been friendly and polite, as anyone would be when trying to make new friends, but there was something different about this message. It felt intentional, thoughtful. "I've been thinking about our conversation," he wrote, "and I wanted to say thanks again. You really made me see things differently. I think I've been so focused on the future that I've forgotten to appreciate the present. So I'm taking the weekend off to just pee, I guess. Anyway, just wanted to let you know." I didn't know what to make of it at first. On one hand, it was nice, of course it was, but on the other hand, it left me with a strange feeling. What exactly had I said that had impacted him so much? I hadn't said anything profound, just a few thoughts here and there. But I realized then that sometimes the smallest moments, the simplest exchanges, can have the biggest ripples. Still, I didn't respond right away. I had my own life to deal with, and I didn't want to come across as someone who was constantly analyzing every little interaction. But the message stuck with me. And that weekend, as I was sorting through some old boxes in the attic, I found an old photo album that made me think about what Jack had said, about appreciating the present, about learning to live more fully. The photos in the album were from a time long before Jack came into my life, a time when I had been young and full of hope, when my world felt big and full of possibility. There were pictures of my children when they were little, of vacations we'd taken as a family, of me before I'd experienced the ups and downs of life that had shaped me. I hadn't realized how much I missed that version of myself, the one who believed the future was something to look forward to, not something to fear. I found myself getting lost in the nostalgia, in the warmth of those memories. But the more I looked at those photos, the more I felt a pang of sadness. The woman in those pictures wasn't me anymore, not completely. Life had chipped away at that version of myself, shaped me into someone who was more cautious, more guarded, someone who thought too much about what might go wrong rather than what could go right. But then I thought about Jack again, about how his simple words had made me reflect in ways I hadn't in years. Maybe that was the key, the idea that we could still change, still evolve, even as we got older. Maybe I could take a page out of his book and stop living in the past, stop holding on to old regrets. Maybe it was time for me to rediscover that part of myself, the part that had been lost but wasn't gone, not completely. It was a few days after that when I saw Jack again. We'd been texting here and there, mostly casual stuff about work and life, but there was something between us now, an unspoken connection that neither of us had quite figured out yet. He suggested grabbing a coffee one afternoon, and I agreed. We met at a small cafe downtown. It was the kind of place you might walk past without giving a second thought. Nothing flashy, just a little neighborhood spot with mismatched chairs and the smell of freshly ground coffee wafting through the air. Jack was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window, a cup of coffee in front of him. He looked up as I walked in and waved. "Hey," he said, his smile warm. "I'm glad you could make it." "Of course," I replied, settling into the chair across from him. There was a comfortable ease between us now, like we'd moved past the awkwardness of our first meeting. Jack took a sip of his coffee and then leaned back in his chair, his expression turning thoughtful. "I've been meaning to ask you something," he said. "You've obviously been through a lot in life. You mentioned some things the other day, but I was wondering, how do you keep going? After everything?" I was surprised by the question. It wasn't what I had expected him to ask at all. But then again, maybe that's what made it so real. I wasn't just a woman older than him who had lived through some stuff. To him, I was someone with real answers, someone whose experiences mattered. For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. How did I keep going? "I don't know," I said finally, my voice softer than I intended. "Some days it's easier than others, I guess. But I think it's about finding the little moments, the small things that make you smile, even when everything else feels heavy. When I look back at my life, there's so much I wish I had done differently. But there are also a lot of moments I wouldn't trade for anything." He nodded, taking it in. "I think that's what I've been missing," he said. "I've been so focused on where I'm going, I haven't been paying attention to where I am." I smiled at him, feeling that familiar connection between us, that shared understanding. I think a lot of us forget that, especially when we're younger. It's easy to get caught up in the idea that we have to be somewhere, that there's always something we need to accomplish, some goal to chase after. But sometimes, the best parts of life are just being. There was a silence between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like we were both digesting the weight of what we had said. I looked out the window, watching the world pass by. People walked briskly along the sidewalk, going about their business, but for a moment, I felt as if time had slowed down for just the two of us. "Thanks," Jack said quietly, breaking the silence. "You've really made me see things differently. I think I needed to hear that." I looked at him, surprised by how much his words meant. "It's nothing, really, but I'm glad it helped." And for a moment, I wondered about the path we both were on, how two people, so different in age and experience, could still share something so real, something so meaningful. Maybe Jack hadn't realized it, but he was helping me to. He was reminding me that there was more to life than what had come before, that the future was still something worth looking forward to, something worth living for. As we finished our coffee and said our goodbyes, I realized how much I had gained from this simple connection. It wasn't just about helping him find his way around town or giving advice. It was about something deeper, something I hadn't expected. Two people on different paths, helping each other find a little more clarity in the mess of life. And maybe that's all we really need sometimes. Someone to walk beside us, even for a little while, and help us remember who we are and where we still want to go. The days that followed our coffee meetup were quieter than I expected. There wasn't an immediate need to see Jack again, nor did I feel like I needed to reach out to him. But there was a lingering feeling inside me, a sense that something had shifted, something subtle but meaningful. It was like our conversation had unlocked a part of me that I hadn't realized was closed off, maybe for years. I had started thinking more, not just about the past, but about the present. The things I wanted, the things I needed to embrace before they slipped away unnoticed. But life has a way of getting in the way of big moments. My routine carried on, and I found myself getting caught up in the usual responsibilities, helping with my aging mother, running errands, and the odd lunch with old friends. Everything felt like it was moving at a steady pace, until one afternoon when Jack called. "Hey, it's Jack. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." His voice had a hint of nervousness, which was strange. He was usually confident, almost a little too sure of himself for someone so young. No, it's fine. What's up?" I replied, leaning against the kitchen counter. I'd just put the kettle on, and the soft sound of water heating filled the silence between us. "I've been thinking. I'd like to talk again. If you're open to it, there's something I've been struggling with, and I could use some advice. I don't want to take too much of your time, but—" I paused, surprised. He didn't usually ask for advice, at least not like this. It felt different. "Of course, Jack. What's going on?" There was a long pause on the other end, and I could almost hear him sorting through his thoughts. "I've been wrestling with this decision, something that's kind of big. It's about work, actually. I've been given an opportunity, but it's taking me to a place I never thought I'd go. A new city, a new job. It's a great offer, but I can't shake this feeling that it might not be the right time. Or maybe it's the right time, and I'm just scared." His honesty made me feel protective in a way I wasn't used to. Jack was someone who had always seemed so sure of himself, someone who walked into every room like he knew exactly where he belonged. To hear him doubt himself like this, it struck a chord in me. "Sometimes," I said slowly, "we get so focused on the decision itself that we forget to ask ourselves what we really want. Maybe you're scared because, deep down, you're not sure if this is what you want, or if it's what you think you're supposed to want." Jack was quiet for a moment. I don't know if I've thought about it that way. I leaned back against the counter, stirring my tea. "You're not alone in that. We all do it, especially when we're young, chasing after what we think will make us happy, without really considering if it's the right fit. Sometimes we forget that it's okay to slow down, to really think about what we want for ourselves, not what others expect." He was quiet for another moment. I guess that's what I needed to hear. I'm so used to always pushing forward, to always striving for the next step, that I forget it's okay to pause." I smiled, the warmth of his vulnerability filling the space between us. It was rare for someone like him to admit such uncertainty. It's more than okay. Sometimes taking a step back gives you more clarity than rushing forward. We spent the next hour talking. It wasn't just about the job or his next career move. It became a deeper conversation about life, about choices, about the pressure to keep moving without knowing where you're headed. In a way, I felt like I was talking to my younger self, the woman I used to be, the one who had put everyone else's needs ahead of her own, the one who had always been striving for the next thing, but never really stopping to ask herself what she wanted. We didn't solve everything in that one conversation, of course. There were still questions left unanswered. But Jack seemed lighter afterward, like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders, and for the first time, I felt like I had really contributed something valuable to his life. The next few weeks passed quietly. Jack's decision didn't come immediately. He took the weekend to think things over, and when he finally reached out again, it was with a kind of resolution I hadn't heard in his voice before. "I've made up my mind," he said one evening, after I picked up the phone. "I'm going to take the job, but not because I feel like I have to. It's because I've finally realized that I'm ready. It's a risk, but it's the right kind of risk. And I think I'm okay with that." I felt a wave of pride for him. It was strange. Pride for someone I didn't even know that well, someone who had only come into my life recently. But that's what happens when you witness someone taking a leap of faith, when you see them finally listen to their own heart instead of the noise around them. It's like you're a part of their growth, a part of their journey, even if you're just a small chapter in their story. "That's wonderful, Jack. I said, my voice sincere. "I'm really happy for you. It sounds like you've found peace with it, and that's all that matters." "I have," he replied. "And you were right, you know. I've been so focused on the destination that I didn't take the time to appreciate where I am. I've got a lot of work ahead of me, but I think I'm finally ready for it. So, thanks again for your advice. It really helped." "You didn't need advice, Jack," I said, smiling softly. "You just needed someone to listen. And that's often the hardest part, to admit to yourself that you don't have all the answers. But you'll figure it out. You always will." He laughed, and there was something lighter in the sound now, less burdened. "Maybe, but I'll definitely be in touch, okay? I feel like I still have a lot to learn from you." I wasn't sure how I felt about that. Part of me, of course, wanted to keep helping him, to continue being a guide, but another part of me, maybe the part that had spent so long feeling forgotten, wondered if I might learn just as much from him. Maybe, in a way, we were helping each other. Maybe we had more in common than I thought. As we hung up, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. It wasn't just that Jack had made his decision or that things seemed to be falling into place for him. It was that I had been a part of it, even if in a small way. And in turn, I had been reminded of something vital, that it's never too late to pause, to reflect, to make a change, no matter how old you are. It wasn't the end of the story, not by a long shot, but it was another chapter in our connection, one that would stay with me for a long time. Jack's new job began sooner than either of us expected. Within a few weeks, he was packing up his small apartment and preparing to move 3 states away. I remember the afternoon he called to tell me the exact date he'd be leaving. His voice held that mix of excitement and uncertainty that comes with any big change, and though I felt happy for him, something inside me tightened. It wasn't sadness exactly, more a quiet ache, as if a door was closing a little sooner than I'd prepared for. We decided to meet one last time before he left. He suggested another walk, just like the first one, in the same park where our conversations had truly begun. When I arrived, the autumn colors had deepened, the trees now dressed in rich shades of amber and rust. The air was cooler too, crisp enough to make me pull my sweater a little closer. It felt fitting, somehow, that the season was changing along with everything else. Jack was waiting near the entrance, hands in his jacket pockets, rocking lightly on his heels. When he saw me, his smile was easy and familiar. "There you are," he said. "I was hoping you'd get here before the sun started setting. I wanted to walk the long path today." I nodded, and together we began down the winding trail. There was a softness to the moment, the kind that comes when both people know a goodbye is coming but neither wants to rush into it. The quiet between us wasn't heavy. It was full of thought, full of meaning. "I wanted to thank you," Jack said after a while, his voice steady. "Not just for the advice, or for listening, but for treating me like someone worth talking to. That meant more than you know." I looked at him, surprised by the sincerity in his tone. "Jack, you are worth talking to. You always were. You just needed someone to remind you." He chuckled softly. "Maybe. Still, I'm glad it was you." We continued walking, the gravel crunching softly beneath our feet. Families were scattered along the path, children skipping ahead, couples sharing quiet conversations, older folks taking their time as they moved along. It was a familiar scene, ordinary and comforting. But the moment between us didn't feel ordinary at all. It felt like something that would stay with me long after the day was done. After a while, we reached a small overlook where the trees parted, revealing the lake below. The surface shimmered with the waning light of late afternoon, golden and calm. We stopped there, standing side by side. "You know," I said, "I never expected any of this. I thought I was just doing my brother a favor. But this has meant something to me too, more than I realized at the time." Jack turned to me, his expression earnest. "What did it mean to you?" I took a slow breath. It wasn't easy to put into words, not because the feelings were complicated, but because they were simple in a way that made them vulnerable. "It reminded me that I'm still learning," I said, "still growing. For a long time, I thought my life was already shaped, already settled. But talking with you, it helped me see that there is still room for new connections, new reflections. I didn't know I needed that." He didn't say anything right away. Instead, he looked out over the lake, nodding slowly, as if absorbing every word. "I think," he said finally, "that maybe we were supposed to meet, even if it was just for this moment in time. You helped me more than you know." There was something bittersweet about hearing that, something warm, and yet undeniably fragile. For a while, we just stood there, letting the wind move gently through the branches above us. When we started walking again, the sun had dipped lower, casting long shadows across the path. The conversation shifted to lighter topics: his move, the city he was headed to, his hopes for the new job. But there was a softness in everything we said, an understanding that this was the last time we'd walk this trail together. Eventually, we reached the parking lot. We stopped beside my car, facing each other in the quiet evening air. "So this is it," Jack said, hands back in his pockets. "I leave first thing tomorrow." "Yes," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "You're going to do well there. I know you will." He hesitated for just a moment before speaking. "I'm going to keep in touch. I don't want this to be the end of our conversations." I smiled. "It doesn't have to be the end. Life changes, but connections don't have to disappear." He nodded, and for the first time since meeting him, I saw something different in his eyes. Not uncertainty, not youth, but a quiet gratitude, a maturity that had grown over the weeks we'd known each other. "Take care," he said gently. "You too, Jack." And then he turned and walked toward his car. I watched him go, the sound of the gravel fading as he moved farther away. When he drove off, I stayed there for a moment, letting the cool air settle around me. As I finally made my way home, I realized something important. That walk, that connection, it wasn't about age or roles or expectations. It was about two people crossing paths at the exact moment they needed someone to remind them of who they were and who they could still become. Some memories stay with you, not because they're dramatic or grand, but because they shift something inside you. This one did, and I carried it with me, quietly, gratefully, knowing it had changed me in ways I wouldn't fully understand until much later. Life has a way of surprising us, and sometimes all it takes is one unexpected walk to bring us back to ourselves.